Outlet Liquor is your place to buy a case. Stock up and save when you shop the lowest prices available every day at Outlet Liquor. You never have to wait for a sale. The more you buy, the more you save. Only at Outlet Liquor.
What's your outlet?
Folks, welcome back to the show where we do get our signals crossed and our swords always are. We get our panel in here, Gatesy 35, intern, Vinny, but we are here to talk the Sabres midseason. We are at 39 of 82 games here, and frankly, I think the Sabres have kind of exceeded expectations in some spots. Obviously, there was the losing streak after the strong start, and it's led to kind of maybe a perception that these Sabres are a little bit streaky, but I think it's more timing and consequence. Gents, let's bring it in here and let's get down to it. We got our mid-season podcast, Streaky Sabres, vibes after 39 games played, 20-17-2, Gatesy.
Yeah, I think if you told fans where the Sabres would be right now in terms of the overall standings, they'd be happy. I think the biggest issue right now is just that streakiness. You know, you have that 8-game skid, which really hurts what that team is now, but you know, you see fans looking at this team when they're on the 6-7 game winning streak because, you know, they're this top team in the NHL. And unfortunately, like we kind of knew going into the season, this team might be streaky and lose some games in a row. And that's exactly where they are. Like this is what we expected.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think when you really look at how this team is made up at the beginning of the year, if you would have told me how this season is going back then, I think I would have taken it. I don't think I really would have, really wanted to change anything. I mean, the streaks are fun and the losing streaks are less fun, but I guess if we win 2 out of every 3, that's nice and all. But I think for a team that's young and exciting, I think when you're really able to sort of build off of that excitement with some long win streaks, winning 5 in a row, winning 6 in a row, winning 4 out of 5 a couple of times, that's really fun. And that gives a lot of people hope, which really hasn't been with this hockey team for as long in the past couple of seasons. So I like what's happening so far. And honestly, even if they're streaky, as long as you take 2 steps forward and 1 step back and not the other way around, you get hot at the right time. You might be able to make some noise come April and May.
Right now, I want to ask you guys a question. Are you more frustrated by that, what was it, the 8-game losing streak, or are you encouraged that probably we're going to have UPL back in the lineup, you know, by this weekend? And with Samuelsson in the lineup, they've been basically a top 10 team, top 5 team in the NHL record-wise. Frustrated or encouraged more so far through these 39 games?
It's honestly super encouraging for me. It's because that 8-game skid, you know, they didn't have Samuelsson. It was early in the year, and you can see where the team's rebounded since then. And yes, as of right now, they've lost 2 in a row, but you look at any NHL team, like 2 losses in a row, it happens during a course of an 82-game season. Where they're at right now, I think it's really positive, and the fact that they can lose 8 games and be such a young team and bounce back and be a couple points out of the playoff spot midway through the year, I think it's really incredible.
Yeah, I think as discouraging as that 8-game skid was, I think it showed just how important it is. And the last 2 games, I know we'll get into that later, but I think that's indicative of how important goaltending and defense is to your overall success. I noticed with a couple of games before this 2-game skid, I'll call it, and hopefully that's where it stops, winning a lot of games in extras, you know, taking a couple of games to overtime. That's what happened with the old Sabres, those 10-game winning streaks. A lot of that happened in overtime and in shootouts. So you had a feeling that this was sort of coming to an end, but I think goaltending and overall defensive play is the key. And And that'll lead us into another conversation later. And I think they need to put a little bit more effort into making sure that they can consistently get good defense and consistently get better goaltending.
Great. Love to hear it. Let's change up the format here. Let's go with the head boxes because we are going with the topic of goalie. Right now, we will all take the role of one of the current Sabres goalies. I will take the cheat code. I'll take UPL. Gatesy, you take Anderson. Vinny, you take Comrie. If you're in GMKA's office, why do you need to be on this team the rest of the season? I'll start. I'm UPL. I'm the future. You've been talking about me for basically half a decade. Anytime I've been in the lineup, we've been winning. Even if I've been letting up goals, I'm good for the vibes. I'm good for the boys. UPL's great for the brand.
You know, I might only be 1 year younger than Ryan Miller, but there's so much that I bring to this team. Maybe not so much on ice as it's been the past couple years, but, you know, that veteran presence in the locker room. We got 2 young goalies. UPL's 23, Comrie's 27. What I can bring to this team off the ice is so much more and so much more valuable than, you know, maybe another goalie can bring.
Look, if I'm Eric Comrie, you're paying me to play in the NHL this year. You're not paying me to go down and be a 27-year-old with the Rochester Americans. And this team is in need of somebody who can get better, who can get hot. Craig Anderson's not really a goalie that's going to get hot. And UPL's a goalie that hasn't played in a lot of big moments. Now, I'm not saying that I don't want UPL up there, you know, on the bench with me, or even if he's starting and I'm his backup. But a 41-year-old guy, great for the vibes mentally, physically, probably not the guy you want in the crease. I'm 27. I can get hot, and I think that's why I want Eric Comrie up here. Just the possibility of not getting arthritis in the middle of the second period is significant.
Fair on all accounts here, gents. And let's get into it. So obviously we got the 3 goalies that caused a roster move we'll talk about right after this. Casey Fitzgerald. And obviously that was, you know, debatably other ways, but the part of the reason is he got the 3 goalies. With that said, it seems like they're going to attack this and keep the 3 goalies for the time being, right? Obviously you look at the schedule, they got 10 games in the next 18 days. This is a team, and I think this is a situation where, yes, like they're happy, and I think it goes back to what we were talking about. The vibes are good around this team right now. But with that said, 2 or 3 bad starts from UPL, do you feel comfortable getting them out there for a 4th, 5th, and 6th when it would really be this team's season on the line at that point? I think it's a good idea to keep Comrie, Anderson, and obviously UPL at once. But I'm curious your guys' thoughts with the way that things are starting to shake out. And obviously, you know, UPL was sick yesterday. But with that said, like, you know, what's your take on how that whole situation unfolded and the handling of it there?
You know, it's something like losing Fitzgerald. It's for having 3 goalies. I don't think the big of a deal as fans might be making out the team. He's a guy that's played how many games this year for the Sabres, and, you know, as a depth defenseman, he might not be the guy that's going to put this team over the edge to win a Stanley Cup and make the playoffs. But having 3 goalies, I think, is way more important than having, you know, an extra depth player on this team. The Sabres last year, that goaltending carousel of 6 goalies, 7 goalies that played games, and this trio right now seems to be doing well together. They're pushing each other, and I think is what from the reports we've heard from the team, it's like Anderson is that presence in the locker room, and I think he kind of knows his role at this point in his career. He's not in there, you know, to get this team, be the guy that plays 60 games a year, get him in the playoffs. Like, he just wants, you know, be there, get a couple more games under his belt, and get this team ready to move on when, you know, his time might be done in the organization.
It's pretty unbelievable, but we witnessed 41 starts from Dustin Tokarski and Aaron Dell last year. Vinny, what are your thoughts on obviously the way that Donnie G and Kevyn are going to have to handle this?
Well, I think this actually might be a really good idea. Now, with that said, because of the rescheduled games, we just saw today the Columbus game from the 27th of December has been moved now to the regular season finale. If we got to win a game to get into the playoffs, the last game of the season, right now I kind of want to be playing the Columbus Blue Jackets, who to this point.
Oh my God. Could you imagine getting to a win and you're so glad that game's there?
Yes. Now, of course, I don't want to put the cart before the horse. Now, I will say, if this were around the horn, Gatesy would have gotten a couple of points there for that answer. I really, really liked what he said. And to piggyback off of that, UPL is young. And Maniac, you said the same thing. If he has a couple of tough starts, you can pull him and feel confident about you have 2 other options, right? I think if You keep just him and Anderson, and UPL has a couple of tough starts, and then you put Anderson in, you're looking at a guy who's probably just going to have an 880 save percentage for the 2 or 3 games that you keep him, right? Now, on the Comrie side, you can rotate. You have a 23-year-old, a 27-year-old that are young, and they can play a couple of in a row. When you have games on like Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Sunday, Tuesday, which they'll have coming up in February, in late January and February, you can play Comrie UPL, Anderson, and then you're giving you're giving those 2 younger guys the higher workloads and a little bit more rest.
Okay, no, seriously, I like that a lot. Speaking of which, things I like a lot, there are some names on the Sabres I don't want to move. One I was glad to see, if it had to get lost in the shuffle, Fitzgerald, claimed by Florida. Are you guys surprised by that?
I think going into the year, you'd think Florida claiming Fitzgerald would probably be a bad move for Florida because they're poised to, make a deep run in the Atlantic. But where they're at right now in the standings, they need that extra help on defense. I hope Fitzgerald's not the answer for them because with the Sabres, he was a good player, but again, like I said earlier, he's not going to put a team over the edge. He's going to fill some holes when he needs to, but I'm interested. I am shocked that someone did claim him.
Yeah, I was surprised when I saw this. I thought he was going to waivers and he was going to be putting on a red, white, and blue jersey, but that is not the case, at least for a little while. But with that said, I am glad I guess I'll word it this way. I'm glad they put him on waivers and not Cal Clegg, because I've been really impressed with the way Cal Clegg has played so far this season. And I was going to use the phrase in limited action. He has not played limited action. He's played a significant amount of games for the blue and gold so far. And I've liked what I've seen. I think he's been playing better than Jacob Bryson. And now with Yoki Haru back, I think Bryson's going to be the one on the chopping block, not Cal Clegg.
Okay, so this actually makes a great point because I don't like Clegg at all. But with that said, I want to hear this from you two. So you got your Dahlin, you got your Power, you got your Samuelson, you got your Yoki Haru. Who is your other 2 if you're in a must-win April 24th Columbus game tomorrow?
I think definitely Clegg. Like, I've really enjoyed his game so far just because I don't know if it's maybe the low expectations going into it, but he's just always done, enough for the Sabres to get by. And that 6th spot, it's tough having Bryson out there because a lot of times he's an offensive defenseman that doesn't put up points, which isn't great when you're a minus 14 or 15 this point in the season. It's maybe I'll go like Lyubushkin, but like maybe the first week on the Sabres Lyubushkin if I can get that answer.
Okay. He did come out with a punch. Obviously, it's been even since. What about you, VC? What do you got?
Yeah, as much as I have just professed my love for Cal Clegg, I don't know if I want him and Jacob Bryson together on a D pairing in a must-win game in April. With that said, look, Lyubushkin has been playing not good lately. I mean, it's been bad. I think it's been bad. So I think if I would really the discussion comes, if we're looking at current rostered Sabres, right? There's nobody in Rochester that I want up right now. Nobody's really impressed me down there to want to give them more NHL time at this point. My answer, to be quite frank with you, as of, 7 hours ago, would have been Casey Fitzgerald and Cal Clegg. But, of course, one of those players is not an option anymore. So I'm just going to say Bryson and Clegg to this point, just because I really don't think Lyubushkin has been good as of late, but his veteran presence, his experience might have to give him the upper hand. And I think the exchange for me personally is between Bryson and Lyubushkin. I think Clegg stays.
Do we just really need a third D-line pairing that's going to throw it into neutral and not fuck up, basically?
Yeah, let the other 2 pairs run.
Yeah, like literally just sustain. Don't get clobbered every time you're out there. I mean, I guess this is the first time that I'm realizing this, but that's the beauty. I mean, Owen Power had a shift last night, against Seattle. I don't know if you guys saw the highlight of that, but basically made about 4 to 5 plays on one shift. I didn't know that was possible in the hockey world. Speaking of not knowing if it's possible in the hockey world, my goodness, you talk about 2 weeks into the season, you're like, maybe that contract will play out a little sloppily, but my goodness, Tage Thompson continues to literally tear up the NHL. It's not even just that he's putting up the stats anymore. He's getting the, I would say the praise and the acknowledgement from all the big hockey spheres and internet, corners. With that said, 31 goals, 26 assists through 39 games played. Virtual, video game numbers for sure. So my question to you guys is, honestly, I wrote it here, over under 26 months until GM KA lets him rework that deal. And I mean, what are you thinking, just as far as what they've seen from him and maybe another player on the team it might encourage you about?
Yeah, I mean, these really are video game numbers we're seeing out of Thompson. Again, completely out of nowhere. Even last year, like when he made those big progressions, a lot of fans were like, he can't do it again a second year. And he's really proven that he's better than that and beyond. And I think that 26 months, it's what, a little over 2 years. If Tage is still on the pace he's on now and still growing as a player, I feel like it'd be tough to not at least make things worth his while a little bit, especially cap going up every year. It's just something crazy about $7 million, give or take, a season for Tage, and Skinner's making $9 million. It's definitely an interesting conversation to have because what he's done this season is just completely remarkable.
Yeah, I think 26 is a really good number.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that this conversation might get brought up this offseason. If the Sabres make the playoffs, I'd be really interested to see what he does then. If we get into the playoffs and we're playing the Pittsburgh Penguins in round 1 and he's matched up against the Crosby line and it's playoff Sidney Crosby and they shut Tage down, he has 1 assist in 5 games, then I think this conversation probably doesn't happen. But if we make the playoffs and Tage has 7 points in 5 games in the playoffs too, this conversation might be happening in July. So I don't love that. I mean, I love the deal now. I mean, who doesn't, right?
Here's the thing, I guess, right? Is if
Right.
you're the agent, you only get one true shot at this.
Yeah.
Is my thinking. Like, you can't keep going every 3 months when a player plays well because no one's gonna want to deal with you. Literally, if a player just plays well, you're right. I mean, geez, if he goes, he's pacing 120 points right now. I mean, 120 points.
Yeah.
I mean, that is definitely, you drop 120 points and then you go 1.5 points per game in a playoff series. I think you have a point that you're probably like going to the table like, listen, dude, we gave you a little bit of leverage, but clearly like we thought you were dealing with like a future top 5 player. Like he's a top 5 player like right now.
Yeah, and I think with that said, you're also looking at, even if like he continues this blistering pace, even reworking this 1 year after, I think Kevyn Adams has to say, like, it's been 365 days. Like, just let this breathe. We'll get to it. I promise we'll get to it. Let's just get into our another season first, because I think if Kevyn Adams lets this deal happen for 1 year and then reworks it for year 2.
And let's remember, we're dealing with Stonewall Kevyn. He will not be pushed around just because you want something to happen.
Yeah, so I don't think I'm going to take the under on 26 months because I like 25 and a half. But
that's why this line is amazing then. This is
a really good line.
I gave it just enough to where, and maybe if you're at the end of a year, maybe you've made the playoffs 2 out of 3 years, like maybe you're pacing the playoffs again, like you really want to like solidify that. I mean, but my goodness, just I mean, it's crazy. I mean, we're watching someone putting up Ovechkin numbers, basically. We have an Ovechkin numbers player. Like, this is the player we always wanted Jack Eichel to be. Like a point and a half per player per point per game. I mean, it's just unbelievable to see. Craziest thing to me, if you guys want to make a point on Tage, we'll get on. But, I mean, it's just like there was one, I think it was against the Capitals the other night where he just got it like in the very deep slot, like almost at the point, and then just kind of half wristed it towards the goal. And everyone's like, basically for a normal person, this would have been like a fluttering, like 56 mile per hour, like wrister that anyone would have saved. But obviously it's a goal for Tage. I mean, just some of the ways he becomes in goal scoring situations is insane.
Yeah, that 26 number is that good because in 2 years, that Darling contract's going to be up. I mean, Okposo's up this year. That's $6 million. You got Cousins you have to pay this summer. That's a great line that I think really puts into perspective where this team values is, Tage's future and the work he's done in above what he's making in $7 million. It's just crazy to me.
Okay, we are 39 games in. And by the way, after this 18-day stretch or whatever, the Sabres do have another 10 days off. So it's going to be very interesting, again, to see how Donnie Meatballs and Co. manages it. Through this in the rundown, who wants to lead off? Anyone got a good one?
For what?
The mid-season thought?
I think the Casey Middlestat hate has not been as warranted as it's been given out.
Thank you.
He's a guy that's taken so much flack throughout the season because I think he's almost an easy target. Like, you're not going to take on anyone in that top six. So when stuff does to go wrong for this team, it's going to be the guy you drafted, 6th, 7th overall a couple years ago that, shown flashes of being a great player and maybe has some off nights, but he's how many points on the season? He's 6 on the team in points. It's like, how can you be too upset with that? He's 23.
Yeah, I'm gonna refrain from the Casey Middlestat conversation because I would like to see him sent in a package to get us one top 4 defenseman. But look, I think the Sabres are one good goalie away from a conference finals, and I think that if the Sabres play the way they have been playing, you give them a good goal, not just like a 9-10 save percentage. You give them like a 9-18 save percentage goalie. I think the Sabres in the conference finals, because that allows, like, what's happening now on these like losing streaks. Now, the Flyers game aside, because there's 82 games in a season. Every team has a game like that. Every team gets shut out once I don't know if there's ever been a team that hasn't gotten shut out at some point during the season, or if that has happened when the last time that had happened. It's very rare. Every team has a bad game like that. But the games that we are losing, these 4-3 games, these 5-3 games, the 4-2s, these are games where your offense is doing all right. You just need to get bailed out a couple times. And Anderson and Comrie and even UPL, and he's had a couple of good performances, are not going to bail you out on a regular basis. You need somebody like a Fleury, or like a Corey Crawford was back with Chicago in 2012. Jonathan, and I'm listing like top 5 goalies. I understand that, so it sounds a little bit ludicrous. But if you can get that, if Devin Levi comes in here and is that, if UPL turns into that, I think you're winning at least 2 playoff series.
Okay. Well, mine isn't as good as that, and I want to piggyback off yours. The only thing I was going to say, Dylan Cousins, 39 points, 39 games, 21 points in his last 16 games. The workhorse from Whitehorse is developing that scoring touch, gentlemen. But, Vinny, you alluded to it. Is it possible? I mean, the roster is in a surplus. We definitely need to get rid of a body, apparently. You know what I mean? Like, we need to shave off a player, with the certain things that we got working. Do you think that this is, do you think there is a spot? Do you see Kevyn has held tight basically every chance he's had? He has every chance he's had. He's the only time he's made moves. He made 2 sets of moves basically. He went out and he got Taylor Hall and Eric Stahl and tried to make a run at it there, and that kind of flopped. And then the only thing he's done is he's taken care of his own. Matthias Samuelsson, other deals on the inside. So with that said, do you think that Kevyn is going to make a move? Do you see him making a move? And if you do, who is it for? What's the spot to make one?
I think if Kevyn does make a move, it's going to be something pretty calm. We're not going to see a massive deadline where we're selling the farm or really bringing on a big top 6 forward to put the team over the edge. I think, in my opinion, like Vinny said, it's tough for the 3 goals the team has now to really find leverage to where to move on from. But even just a good top 6 defenseman that can round out this team, because if you look at the team stats, like that bottom pairing with like Bryson being a -14 or 15 and Lyubushkin's not being too much better, the team is losing games when those 2 are on the ice because he can't be a -15 halfway through the season. That's killing this team. If they can at least get someone out there that's serviceable, can get the job done, isn't going to want to play, top 2 minutes, because the Sabres have those top defensemen. That's what the team needs badly.
Yeah, I think there is a move made. I don't think it's a blockbuster move. And I'm going to make this following comparison. I think the Sabres and the Bills are actually relatively similar organizations in the way that their front offices like to run them. They like to take care of their own guys. They like to draft their players. They like to re-sign their players that play well. They like to make their players believe in the culture and really play for one another and play for the city, quite frankly, which is fun to watch.
You got to want to be a Buffalo Sabre.
Yes. And the Bills made a move at the debt. Now, the Bills and the Sabres are not at the same points in their franchise's history or even trajectory. I will admit that. But the Bills made a move at the deadline this year to get a position of need to a certain extent, right? Now, they haven't really utilized that position, maybe all that much as a lot of people were expecting. Now, this is not a Bills podcast, but I wanted to throw that in there because I think the Sabres might do something similar. I think they might trade for a defenseman and get rid of maybe a current defenseman in that trade that isn't seeing the ice time that he wants, or even a forward that's maybe not seeing the ice time they want. In the form of the Bills, Zach Moss wasn't really seeing the field all that much. He's a decent talent. Move on from him, bring somebody in that can help in a certain way in a different aspect of the game. Maybe they move on from a player. I don't think it's Olofsson. I don't think it's Middlestat. I think they keep them around because they're their guys.
I agree.
Think maybe they do move on. Maybe they trade Cal Clegg. Like maybe they trade Bryson, but move him so you're not needing to add an extra roster spot. Maybe you move Bryson and a sixth for a slightly better defenseman that can bolster your defense up a little bit. And then that leads you right into the goalie point. If your defense is forcing low percentage chances, then the goalies look better and everything continues to build from there. That helps your offense because your offense plays with more confidence. They know the defense can bail them out, yada, yada, yada. And that will make for a more well-rounded team performance. But I don't think the move's a blockbuster at all.
Okay. Well, hey, as we go down the track here on Crossing Swords Podcast Midseason Pod, the expectations have changed, gents. Plain and simple. That's what happens when you start 7-3. I mean, again, I think at the 7-3, it was tempered. But when you end the 2022 calendar year on a 6-game win streak, when you're pulling off OT wins at Boston, when you're winning, 9 of the last 12 games, the expectations have changed, I think, a little bit. Obviously, this team was projected to get, 77, 78 points before the year at the Vegas Sharps, the sports books and everything. Right now, they're pacing about 90. If they pull out a win and an overtime loss or anything like that in the next 2 games, that would be 45. That would get them to a 90-point pace. With that said, a top league scoring team right now. Team with tons of momentum. A team when Matthias Samuelsson is in the lineup is at least 10 games above 500. Is non-playoffs a disappointment for this 2022-2023 Sabres roster?
I would say non-playoffs is not a disappointment. It's more, the vibes of the team. Like, look at the Atlantic. That top 3 is solid. And the Metro is deep. Like, making a playoff spot right now is very difficult. And just because this team is a few points out of that last wild card spot come April, it's not the end of the world. It's a young team that has the more than enough possibility to make the playoffs, but it's not playoffs or bust for this team. And I think fans' morale, shouldn't only focus on that playoff spot because you've seen this team, they're streaky and, they're not healthy a lot of the time. Like, it's knock on wood, like another defenseman goes down like Samuelsson did, another skid comes, like you can't base the entire season off that little streak there.
Yeah, I will say that depending on how the rest of the season goes, right, we're almost to the halfway point. It very well could be a disappointment that the Sabres, miss the playoffs. And I think a lot of people might be because people were disappointed when the Sabres didn't make the playoffs 2 years ago and the year before that. You win 10 games in a row, you win 8 games in a row, and then you miss the playoffs by so much. That's disappointing. It would be an even bigger failure to have the success this team is having this year suddenly get cold offensively and then fall down the rungs of the ladder that much again. That would be disappointing. So I hate to throw in the caveat of it depends on by how much they miss. If they miss by a significant margin because they got cold offensively and their defense wasn't good enough to stop teams from scoring 3 goals a night, that would be disappointing.
I mute monstered myself. Let me go devil's advocate. I tell you that the Sabres won't make the playoffs, but UPL will play half the games the remainder of the way, and he'll have a .920 save percentage. You sign up for that in an instant?
Deal.
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
Because it's tough to imagine that without making the playoffs. I get why that's a painful thing, but yeah, I mean, I just think you're right. Like, yes, it would be astounding. It would feel so good to make the playoffs. It would honestly feel kind of like 2017 Bills. Again, we talk about the Bills and the Sabres aren't the same. It would just be like, yeah, this team isn't going to win the ultimate big thing, most likely, just because they don't have like at the key positions, which is obviously goalie. But with that said, yeah, just to make the playoffs, to get that kind of proverbial monkey off your back would be tremendous. And speaking of tremendous, just wanted to get some other topics out of the way here. Secondary tickets on Saturday. I mean, we're talking about the Sabres being back. I think that this recent 6-game winning streak got the fans all the way back to where they want to be in the arena on a weekend night for now. Now, I know that weekday nights are still going to be a challenge. I mean, let's face it, Monday, it's not easy to get downtown at 6:45 p.m. for that puck drop. But I feel like, again, not back to 05, 07, not even back to 08, 09, but I feel like we're back to the early 2010s almost, where there's an optimistic belief that this team is going to battle every night, and that if you go and pay for a ticket, you're not going to see like a ho-hum 3-1 loss.
Yeah, and you think, too, that the Sabres right now are battling with, the Bills for the attention of fans, and the fact that the city is able to give the Sabres team this much buzz right now when the Bills are where they're at right now, I think it's actually incredible that on a weekend game, like, yeah, it's going to be tough to get fans in on a Sunday, but the city cares about the Sabres right now a lot.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. Eventually, the NFL season will be over, and whether it ends with the Bills triumphantly winning in February, or if the Bills don't even play past the second weekend in January, there are Sabres games to be played after that, and you want people to care about those Sabres games. I remember a couple of years ago, I believe it was the year the Bills made the AFC Championship against the Chiefs. I remember talking to my friend, his name's Jeremy, and I was saying, like, well, like, I guess we can look forward to, like, Sabres games every day now. And he's like, can we really? Like, I don't think these are going to be all that fun to watch. And they weren't, because the team basically imploded and it fell down the stands.
Minor loophole was that was the year where COVID delayed the start of the NHL season. So the Sabres were literally playing their first games in January. Like, they were like 2-1 when you were saying that.
Yeah. Well, so that was my point, was like, beginning of the playoffs, it's like the Sabres are good and the Bills are good. Well, this is going to be such a fun, winter and spring. And it turned out to be fun, fun for the Bills for a while. They got there, to the AFC Championship game. And then the Sabres basically very soon after that fell off a cliff, essentially.
Literally a cliff. That was so painful with some of
I will say the Flyers game, very cheap tickets available in the 100s, offensive zone, shoot twice. It was like $40 top of the circles. Now, rescheduled game Monday night makes that tough. But yeah, I expect the weekend ticket prices to be pretty high, and that place to be full as long as the Sabres do continue to win two out of three or something like that. Can't afford another losing streak, or those prices will drop back down.
100% cannot afford another losing streak. Speaking of remainder of season, give me an over/under for the Sabres top winning streak. Will they win more than 3.5 games in a row the remainder of the year between now, game 40 and game 82?
I think if this team doesn't win more than 3 games in a row the rest of the season, that'd be a big disappointment, because as there's one thing that's certain in life, it's the Buffalo Sabres right now are streaky. And if they can't string together 4 wins in a row, that's something super scary, because I think this team's really big off vibes, and once they get hot, they're really moving. So they can't get it going more than 2-3 games. Might be a long rest of the year.
What's the phrase that Jeremy White says on WGR? Meaningful games in March. And I think the only way to have meaningful games in March is to string together victories of 4 or 5 or even 6 games in a row. You can't afford, and I'm sure the Sabres are a streaky team, so I'm acknowledging that they might lose their next game. They might lose their next 2 games and go on a 4-game losing streak. But then you have to win the next 3 games, and then you have to maybe lose a game and then win 4 in a row, because they put themselves in a hole with that 8-game losing streak. And that's why they have to work so hard to climb back. And the way the Sabres have played, they've been so hot as of late. They should be in a playoff spot. They shouldn't be chasing a playoff spot still, but they are because they dug themselves a hole. You can't afford to dig yourselves a hole, but if you have a golden shovel in the form of a 6-game winning streak in February, that'll give you some help.
Seriously, that's how you climb the ladder. Speaking of climbing the ladder, make sure you're following our guys Gatesy35 on social media and BCristiano3. And of course, all of the action, all of the Sabres updates at Cross Swords Pod. You know, I started thinking of all the depth the Sabres have now, guys, as we sign up here. I want to play a quick game real quick. I went nuts. I'm like, what was going on last year at this time? You know, like when we didn't have depth. Like I was trying to remember, truthfully. Can either of you tell me how many games Robert Hagg played last year?
To this point,
did that name just hit Gatesy like a smack in the face?
Yeah, that you could have told me that was a dream, and I would have believed you because I haven't thought of Robert Hagg, especially in a blue and gold jersey, and I can't even tell you how long.
How many games last year did he play for the Sabres?
34.
41.
48 games from Robert Hagg. Now you got that, and then you're thinking, okay, what was the scoring? John Hayden at the center position. How many games did he play last year for the Sabres?
Hey, you know what? Shout out John Hayden. I was at the Sabres-Panthers game. Oh, boy. I don't remember what – this had to be like maybe it was March.
Those are some high-scoring affairs, right?
We lost 6-1 that day. I had over 6.5 goals in that game, and John Hayden scored the lone Sabres marker late in the third to get me my over. So I will always love him for that. I won $7. That's all I care about.
Gents, do you even want to guess?
Is it more than 50?
How many games John Hayden played?
Yeah.
I want to say 55, but I feel like that's high. So I'm going to go with 43.
I was going to say 53.
55 games for John Hayden.
I'm not right because
and again, wait. The idea that we've subtracted 55 games from John Hayden and 48 from Robert Hagg alone is such a win for the progression of this roster. Hopefully we'll continue to progress. Keep an eye out for our progression on Trademark Sport, Cross Swords Pod. You know the show where sometimes we do get our wires crossed, the signals crossed, but our swords always are. Let's get a good streak. Let's get some winning streaks in the second half of the season. Let's get to the playoffs, and let's go Sabres.
Let's go Buffalo.